Welcome to Dollars and Cents, Creating Your Fulfilled Life with Nicole Romito from Private Vista. In this podcast, we draw from years of experience as well as guest specialists to help you create the life you imagine. Join us in this journey as we enlighten and empower you to align your lifestyle to help you achieve your goals with a clear picture of your future. Now, let's get to the show.
Hello, and welcome to the Dollars and Cents podcast with your host, Nicole Romito. Nicole, good to be with you. How are you?
I'm doing fabulous, Bill. You know I am every time I'm in studio with you. How are you today, my friend?
But the feeling is the same, which is what's so beautiful about doing this podcast with you. I really enjoy being with you. And more importantly, I really enjoy the conversations that you bring to people. There's so much information in such an entertaining and accessible way, if you will.
I will. And on that note, I think you always know some of my favorite podcasts. I always have a warm place on my heart when one of my amazing colleagues joins me to share a little bit of their wisdom. And that is the case today. So I'd like to welcome my colleague, Greg Bogdan, into the studio today.
Good afternoon, Nicole. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. So before we get into our topic at hand, I want to give our listeners a little bit of background on you. So as I mentioned, listeners, I have in studio with me Greg Bogdan. He is one of our senior advisors. He has 19 years of experience in our industry, and we've been lucky enough to have him on the Private Vista team since 2015. As all of our advisors are, Greg has his CFP or Certified Financial Planning designation, and he enjoys creating lasting relationships in his role as a trusted advisor to his clients. He finds it most rewarding to help clients through their situations. Oftentimes, we're called in when they are in transition, and as all of us at Private Vista, he's going to start by building a customized plan for that particular client. He really enjoys educating his clients so that they can make informed decisions and they have the confidence of knowing how they're going to achieve their own vision of financial independence while living a more enriched and fulfilling life. So, Greg, now that we know a little bit about you professionally, why don't you take a minute and share a little bit about, I know I've had the pleasure of meeting your lovely wife, Christy, and your darling daughters. And listeners, we all know, I have my little spirit animals amongst my colleagues, and Greg happens to be the dad of one of them. And so Isla is one of my spirit animals, but we should probably talk about all three.
Yes, you can't forget Adeline. So I live with Christy and our three daughters. Adeline is 8, Isla is 6, and Josephine is 2.5. I think Nicole is going to add Josephine to her spirit animals very shortly.
There's always room for more.
As soon as they meet.
There's always room for more. And what do you and your posse of women enjoy doing when you're not working with our clients?
As much outdoor activity as we can, whether we're biking around in Elmhurst, out for a walk, playing with the dog, anything that keeps us outside and moving.
That's awesome. I think translate that, listeners, he's trying to exhaust the girls with lots of fresh air and activities so that they'll get into bed on time. That's my translation. All right. Well, great. Now that we know a little bit about you professionally and personally, let's kind of talk about our topic at hand. And what Greg and I are going to have a conversation about today is we're going to talk about a financial team. And what do we mean by that? Why would you need one? When would you need one? Who should be on the team? This is a really common question that Greg and I get. I know oftentimes at the beginning of a client relationship, or even when we're out and about, maybe at a networking event or even at a family event, a lot of times people might say, well, I've got my CPA or I have my tax attorney. Greg and I were talking about it, getting ready for the call. But like oftentimes they might not even know it, but a client might have a team of one. So why don't we start off with that, Greg, and then you can kind of take us down the path of how this looks and develops.
Sure, absolutely. So Nicole mentioned a team of one, which we threw around earlier, and whether somebody chooses their team or not, they have somebody who's working on their finances, somebody who's filing their tax return, They may have pulled a estate plan offline. They are their own professional in those areas. We don't necessarily advocate that being a good long-term solution. There's an ever-changing world in all of those areas that gets more complex year to year, and having a team in place to help manage it and help you make decisions that are best for you and your family is an ongoing issue that we see and something we can help with.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I mentioned, and our longtime listeners will know, all of the advisors at Private Vista either have their CFP designation or are working towards it. So why don't you, it's probably been a while since I've gone into a little bit of the detail of all the areas that we study and become knowledgeable about. So why don't you maybe explain, Greg? So even though you and I have our CFPs and it gives us a great broad base of knowledge, why do our clients have other professionals on the team as well?
So the certified financial planner professional designation is a great broad starting point that gives us a background in a lot of these areas where we're not fully licensed. We can't file tax returns as a CFP. We're not able to draft estate planning documents. However, I like to say we know enough to be dangerous. We've read a lot of documents.
Yes.
We've read law textbooks when we're studying for the CFP. So we're familiar with the legalese and the jargon that's out there. So we're a good sounding board for clients. So there are times when we're sitting in meetings, whether we're just a fly on the wall, just an extra set of ears, or we're participating and helping drive the conversation forward, we're fully aware of the client's situation and can help drive the conversation and start to help craft some of the solutions that they might need.
Yeah. And I know you and I, when we've been working with clients, we've definitely seen a couple of things, just to expand on your last comment, that because of the depth of our financial planning process and the depth of our relationships with clients, we really do know everything about them. And as you mentioned, we're not lawyers, we're not CPAs, but we do have a broad enough base of knowledge to know what opportunities there might be or vulnerabilities. And so we can have the conversations with the client. We're talking in plain English. I know another thing our clients like about is we're not on the clock. So we're not billing by the hour. So oftentimes they feel more comfortable, maybe even like thinking out loud or sharing the personal side of why they do or do not want to do something. And I think by having the meetings with us first, we're able to kind of help them gather their thoughts, get their ducks in the row, and at least maybe from a preliminary perspective, say, hey, I think, these two solutions or options might be the right fit. But as you mentioned, like, let's actually have the Zoom call or a meeting with your attorney and or CPA, because they are the experts in the tax and law field. So I do think that is why oftentimes clients will be the first call they make. But then we in short order know, okay, which professional do we need to pull in and when?
Exactly. And we're often that, as Nicole mentioned, we're the first ones they might mention a sale of a property or they need to buy a new property. So they come to us first and we start talking through the finances behind it. But then part of that conversation is, titling and the estate structure. And is your CPA aware if there's a sale coming? What are you doing to help those proceeds direct into the right part of your overall plan? We hear that first, and then we'll reach out oftentimes to the CPA, and they may not even have heard. And so we're the ones starting the conversation, more broadly speaking.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it makes it easier for the client.
It does. And oftentimes, especially, I know a lot of the other professionals we partner with, those that have a team mentality, they appreciate it because we kind of have everything tidied up, right? We've got, here's a current balance sheet. Here's how their cash flow is working, or, here's what they need to cover the expenses if they're selling a business or they're going to become financially independent. So they're no longer going to have that paycheck. So I think even the like-minded professionals appreciate that we've done a lot of the legwork and really have it teed up to have the meatier part of the conversation.
Absolutely. Yesterday, just as one example, pretty representative, I think, of what we do here at Private Vista, but had a retired couple, had a call with them and their CPA. They're busy flying between grandchildren and just wanted to check in
Right.
on the second half of the year. Where's their
Sure.
income going to come from the portfolio, their rental properties? Do a quick tax planning session, 30 minutes, and we have the next 6 months set for them. So it was very quick in the grand scheme of things, but it really, I think, gave them a good path forward that they were involved with.
Yeah, and absolutely. And it was one phone call. So
One
it
phone.
wasn't the old telephone game where the CPA is like, well, tell Greg or Nicole, we want to do ILETs or a defective grantor trust, or right. They're talking in all the jargon or the legalese. And then the client, just like we would if we weren't in this industry, it kind of gets a little mangled in the game of telephone, and we're trying to figure it out. So I love that you just had the direct conversation, easy peasy. And as you said, they were on their way and you had a plan for the remainder of the year.
Nice and quick.
Yeah,
exactly.
We like that. We're all about efficiency. I know I'm thinking of a client where the the wife died unexpectedly, and we had been working with them for many years. We know their CPA, we know their estate planning attorney actually had retired. So it was interesting where they had a team, but they looked to Private Vista kind of as like the go-to person, like you said. And so when the wife died, I know, gosh, I was immersed in helping him settle her estate for literally a year and a half.
Wow.
And it was almost like my full-time job, because even though we were involved, they both were doctors, and there were old like retirement accounts no one knew about, and from former hospitals. And then we're trying to contact the administrator for these plans, and they did not want to play nicely. And so I know the husband, the surviving spouse, was really grateful that I would, be like, we have to be on the phone, but I'll get on the phone, authorize it. I'll ask the questions. We'll make sure we follow up on it. And he was just like, I had no idea. We thought we had everything in order. And even though they were a good part way down that path, just like me being able to call the accountant and we're tracking down, like, where's the 1099s for this trust, or do we want to direct it to the marital or the family trust, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then getting an estate planning attorney in so we could make sure what was going to the family trust and things like that. So it's, even though you might think you have everything in order or you're a good part of the way there, it's really helpful to have not only your team in place, as you mentioned, but to have who's the go-to person. So you just have one person to call, and then they can kind of caucus the other members and pull in as needed.
Exactly. It really helps the client out, knowing who they can make one phone call, get answers, at least have somebody to start managing the process.
Exactly.
Estate settlements are always complex.
They are.
Even as well laid out as you think they are in advance, and how well positioned things are, there end up being little snakes in the grass that you pop up and you have to scramble and sort through them. So having us as somebody who could say, okay, we've handled this before, we're comfortable doing this, this is the path forward, or, oh no, we have to pull in the lawyer on this one, or reach out to the CPAs. We're perfectly adept at handling that kind of situation without having to get the client back involved until they need to be.
Exactly. And the key point I want to highlight or reiterate for our listeners is we've done this hundreds of times before. Oftentimes with our clients, maybe they've had to settle a parent's estate or things like that, but more often than not, this is their first time having to do it for their own affairs.
It doesn't happen often to our clients, but it's something that we have every year. We experience it, each advisor on their own, probably 3, 4, 5 times.
Exactly.
I had a separate client meeting recently with, one of the important parts of having a financial team in place is being proactive. And we met with the clients and then the next generation, and we're helping them better understand their parents' plan.
Yep.
And so there's a little bit of complexity, different properties and LLCs, and other than that, it's pretty straightforward.
Right.
But even just for somebody who didn't evolve with the current structure and grow with it,
Right.
stepping into it cold 10, 20 years down the line when somebody passes away is a scary place to be.
And typically pretty overwhelming.
Very overwhelming and intimidating. And
Yeah.
then you don't know who to turn to.
Right.
But, meeting the next generation now and getting involved and helping educate them on what's in place and why also. The why is hugely important when you're talking legacy planning and trying to keep family values intact while assets pass generationally. So the family planning like that, one of the questions that we were asked is, well, how do we reach out to the CPA or who's the estate attorney? Well, we provide their contact info and then just call us and we'll coordinate the calls with them when the time comes.
Exactly. So we've talked and we've given a few examples of how we've seen teams work successfully. One of the things we mentioned kind of at the top of this episode is team of one. So if there's especially with technology and things like this today, if you're salaried employee, everything's paid in cash, even if maybe you get some stock or equity as your compensation, maybe you're using TurboTax, you're doing your own taxes. Maybe you're like, I like investing. I like to follow the market. So I'm going to manage our own money. So then you got a team of one. What are your thoughts or what have you seen as people evolve we don't want to be like right or wrong, but when might it be the time where you've evolved or kind of graduated to needing a team, and maybe give some examples and like the how and when you would pull in the different members, like to add them to the team?
So great question, Nicole, of when to start building your team. Things evolve slowly for people typically when they're younger, start out more simple and may not have, you're not married, don't have kids yet. Once those life events start to happen, if they do, then estate planning becomes a necessity, not just a nice to do.
Absolutely.
Career-wise, as people evolve, as people grow and reach their 30s plus, and they start really growing into their careers and maybe getting stock options or taking on ownership in a business or law firm. Yes, their finances get better quickly, but it's also more complex.
It's so much more complex, right? You're getting well beyond the W-2, if you will.
Exactly. You start pulling in different schedules, K1s, maybe the stock options are a different animal on their own. Yes, you're provided somebody through your company, but oftentimes they aren't as far along as they need to be to fully help out.
Well, and they're also not tax professionals, right? How often have we talked to the HR person and they'll say, I can walk you through how the plan works, but I can't give you advice on what you should do.
That's very true.
Yeah.
And so the CPA then steps in, and along with filing taxes, if they're fully versed in your situation, they can help advise too.
Right.
But then it comes into the financial side of things, what to do with these assets as they're growing. What's the best place to put them? What types of accounts or investment vehicles to help save for the long term, to help your family, your growing family, save and prepare for retirement. When you look out even further, sale of a business type event, or a IPO of a public company. I mean, those are life-changing events.
Yes.
And they typically only happen once in a lifetime. So you want to have the people in place before that happens. And as your career is evolving, constantly evaluating who's on your team and what your plan looks like is important, and making sure that your team can grow to where you're going to grow. And if changes need to be made, it's better to do that sooner rather than later.
Right. Because we have seen it. I mean, as our clients, like you said, are evolving through their career or their business that they started, or a lot of times next generation just takes it to a whole different level. Just like we help our clients become financially independent. Well, you know what? Accountants and attorneys, they also too look, most of them, to a day where I don't need to work for pay, right? Or maybe who you started off with in your 40s was appropriate, but they don't have any experience with multiple business entities or really complex either legacy planning or estate tax planning techniques. So it is important that not only as the client situation is evolving, as you mentioned, the tax world is continually, if not constantly, evolving. And we're going to have it looking like it probably a big change at the end of next year. So that's going to be one layer. And then who knows, what it could change to after that. So
It's part of the evolving process in the world that we live in.
I know,
We try to
right?
stay current, and we read articles on those topics. We can't execute on them, but we can point
Right.
you in the direction of the CPA and let you know this could pertain to you. It's worth getting a meeting now, when we're in 24 instead
Yeah.
of waiting till 25,
Yeah.
where it's going to be very difficult to start that conversation.
Hey, pardon the interruption. I know you are listening to Dollars and Cents, Creating Your Fulfilled Life with Nicole Romito, and we're happy you're here. If you have any questions, please head over to myprivatevista.com or the show notes to find out how to reach us. We'd love to hear from you.
Well, there's only so many hours in the day, right? And so the attorney has the same amount of time as all of us, and they know what's coming, and they have more than one client. So you're exactly right. I think, after we have the election here in the US and see how that turns out, I think we could probably see the push start end of this year, if not early next year.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a very likely outcome. Yeah.
I do too.
Mhm.
So one of the things you mentioned too is like, for those people who are either maybe like doing it themselves or, well, I do my own taxes and I have a CPA, like double check me or things like that, is being proactive. So I know, Greg, you and I both have had this with clients where some of these concepts or opportunities or solutions that might be possible for our clients, they're usually not a one and done conversation. So it's not just like, here's your basic will and here's the 3 key things that does. Just figure out who you want to put in these decision makers and we'll call it a day, right?
Absolutely. Yes. That's the way we look at them is more of a living document, which changes and evolves with family dynamics and personal situations that change. When you look at tax law and estate planning changes that happen, either of those or both of those can impact as something as simple or straightforward as a will. We see all the time people who say they don't need a will because they wrote theirs in 1995 and everything is still applicable.
Right.
And then there's been titanic shifts in the industry since then that simply because the same people are still around doesn't mean the whole document should probably be rewritten.
Right.
And if you pay for that now, those changes while you're living, it makes things simpler for everybody who's left afterwards to execute your wishes without having to maybe go to probate or involve other lawyers and professionals to help.
Yeah, exactly.
Help sort through.
And that's a really good point you bring up is I know as part of our planning process, we regularly update all our clients' plans, generally on an annual basis. And one of the parts of that is we will review or provide a summary of, hey, you last updated your trust, even if it was like 2018, 2019. I can't tell you more often than not, they'll look at those subsequent decision makers. And especially for our clients who are a little further along in life, they might be like, oh, well, my sister died last year. And I don't, now the third choice is my first choice, and I'm not comfortable with that. Or I no longer talk to, or we had a falling out with this particular child, or I don't talk to that friend or cousin, or because, it's the same thing with mine. I don't know about you. I've done my documents, but I don't review them regularly, right? So it's nice to have a process where, again, we're being proactive to say, hey, we'll use Greg and Christy. Here's everyone who you decided to do what, or as your lovely daughters continue to grow, they're little people now, but Isla at 30, we might be like, man, we got to lock that up with 3 trustees before that girl's
She'll be running
anything.
a company by then. I
Exactly.
think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll probably be on our 4th company, but yeah. But right, I mean, we all have the best intentions, but not only do we change, but the people we care about and want to provide for, or the people we chose as our decision makers, very frequently change.
It's typically when those life events happen, or a few of them, right? When all the when all the children have graduated college.
Right.
Oh, it's time to take a look at our documents because they were 6 and 8 last time we drew them up. And now they're 18 and 26 and getting married. And,
Yeah.
it's now time to start slotting them into these different roles. So that's a common trigger that we see. I had one client, we talk about the importance of planning, and especially for new clients to go through a financial plan. Came in and they said they had their estate planning documents all done, and they would bring them in when we had the meeting. So,
Okay.
all right, fine. They bring them in, we flip through them quickly and see that they were never signed. The client had them drafted 5-6 years earlier, had never signed them. The estate attorney had never followed through to be sure that the documents were executed. This was kind of the one-man team concept. So
Right.
there was nobody double checking their work and helping make sure the process was followed through.
Yeah.
So it's an extreme example. It doesn't happen very often, but it does happen.
It does. Or we'll see. I know we've both had the situation where you're talking to a prospective client. They send you statements. Oh, yeah, no, we did estate documents, and they did them and signed them. But then you're like, oh, that's interesting. Everything's still titled joint tenants with right of survivorship, right?
That one a lot.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we'll see, like, great, you got these trusts, but they're not funded. And you're still going to, have extra steps to go through before you get everything to the trust. Could be additional costs, certainly will be a delay of having, monies distributed.
Right. But that's the reason you drew up the documents, is to transfer the ownership and have everything in place. And that's where, a strong financial advisor working with estate planning attorney or CPA will really work together to make sure everything is coordinated and followed through and cleaned up.
Actually implemented, right? Yeah. I think that we see that a lot. A lot of times when people are like, well, okay, great, we'll do our plan. And then like, why we'll do our plan and we'll take it. And I'm like, look, everybody has the best intentions. And generally when you leave the meeting, life happens, right? You might be all excited and engaged in the meeting, but you hang up the phone or walk out of the door and you're going back to work or your family or whatever. And oftentimes it falls to the bottom of the list.
Just flips again. Yeah.
I do think a big part of the value of having your financial planner kind of lead the team is exactly what you said, is you make sure that things do get across the finish line.
Absolutely. It's helping everybody stay accountable.
Right.
And making sure that family is taken care of and our clients.
Absolutely. Well, Greg, we are getting towards the end of our time together here. Is there anything else you wanted to make sure to share with our listeners? And if not, maybe do you have like 1 or 2 key takeaways for our listeners from our conversation today?
I would say one of the hardest things about getting a team in place or working with your team that's in place is just staying proactive. Life is busier than ever, more complex than ever. If the situations we spoke about are highly successful people and families who have these situations, these concerns that they need to have help with. So for them to find the extra time is difficult, but it's very valuable. I'd like to say, it's an old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Trying to mitigate something after the fact is far, far less effective. So getting ahead of things is the best outcome, or leads to the best outcomes, I should say.
I would agree. I mean, because if you're talking about whether it's tax related or, the one thing we let's say with 2 things we can guarantee, death and taxes, right? But if the more you have your house in order and the more as appropriate you bring in the adult children or whoever your decision makers are, it's just better to have the conversation along the way. You're hearing the words from the horse's mouth, if you will. Many families have more than one child or grandchild or beneficiary. So if you can kind of sit everyone around the table, then they know, yeah, okay, this is what Greg and Christy wanted. So, because we heard it from them and they explained, if it was needed, why they're doing it this way. And the other thing I would say too is, oftentimes the other professionals, because they have relationships, but it's a little more transactional. They may not be able to call all their clients when there's a major change to the tax law, or even just to call their clients annually to say, oh, hey, Mary, oh gosh, you're selling your business. Let's get together and plan for that. But because we are talking with our clients on a consistent basis, we're staying on top of everything. And that'll allow us to bring in these professionals as needed. And as you have correctly emphasized, the sooner the better, because these are big decisions. It takes a lot of time. We're working with smart and successful people, but they don't generally deal with taxes or the estate planning piece of the law. I know we have a lot of lawyers as clients, but maybe they're like M&A lawyers or real estate lawyers or whatnot. And, the law is a wide and varied place. So
it is. And the complexity of all of it seems to be growing every year.
exactly.
And
changing.
Changing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that for our listeners, kind of the key takeaway is you don't need to do it on your own. And as you're kind of getting to a point where you got more than one piece going on and you've accumulated the wealth, there's certain levels where there's going to be strategies where you can either reduce or eliminate estate taxes. Certainly, when you have some of these big life events, as you've mentioned, Greg, if you're also charitably inclined, it's great to pair some type of legacy or charitable strategy with I'm selling my business. I'm calling it a day. I was a CEO at a company and now I need to start getting out of this company stock and things like that. But again, these aren't conversations you start on November 1st.
Hopefully not.
Yeah, you could, but I don't know how happy your team's going to be with you. So I think that's, at least from our conversation today, is time is your friend. You don't need to do it on your own. The internet is not your friend with these, because a lot of this is state specific and you don't know if you're on Zoom Law, is that attorney even licensed in the state, or are these documents up to date with the current changes to the state law? So I think we're both big fans. You get what you pay for in this area. So
unfortunately, yes.
Yeah. So build your team wisely, but build the team.
Build a team wisely and have them in place to grow with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insights and your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. We'll definitely have you back. One of the questions that I ask all my guests is, if you could live anywhere and you didn't have the constraints of working, school districts, being close to family or whatnot, where would you live and why?
So I love this question, and I think it would undoubtedly be somewhere in the Denver area. I lived there before moving to Chicago, and there's just such a great balance between city and mountain life and just outdoors life.
Well, that's what you mentioned at the beginning. You and your family really love being outdoors.
Exactly. And it's great to just get away.
Yeah.
It's harder to do that here in the Midwest. You can still do it.
You can, yeah.
But just having everything so convenient out there is very unique, and fell in love with that when I lived there. So we'll get back there one day.
That's awesome. I love it. Well, I will add that to the list. I think I know, probably our listeners know, is my sister lives outside of the Denver area as well. So it is beautiful.
It is. We have a lot of friends there. We try to get back there as much as possible. Just have to guide one of the girls to go to college out there.
Well, there's lots of good choices. Lots of good choices. So, all right. Well, great. Well, thanks again for your time. If any of our listeners want to get in touch with you, what is the best way to do so?
Sure. My phone number is 630-455-0025. You can email me, gbogdan@myprivatevista.com, or find me on myprivatevista.com as well.
Great. Yes. And also too, for our listeners, if you go to our homepage, there is a contact us button near the upper right, and you can just put in your information there, reference this episode, and that you'd like to get connected with Greg, and we will be able to also connect you that way.
Nicole, I thought Greg's answer was going to be a cabin out in the woods, way away from everybody, so that he could escape the wife and 3 daughters. So
Well,
was
again, Bill, they aren't teenagers yet. So check back in 10 years.
Yeah.
You wait. You'll be there. Don't worry.
To
It's
be
good.
continued.
Yeah, to be continued for sure. Although I did make a mess here while I was listening to the conversation, because at one point when you said we could do our taxes on a postcard, I had a mouthful of water. It came out everywhere. I'm gonna have to call my.
Yeah, that one always makes me chuckle. Or when people are like, "Oh, I'm doing TurboTax," but yet then they want us to figure out like, how do you feed your 1099s in? Or then I'm like, I don't know. I have a CPA. I cannot help you with this.
I don't handle those. Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to ask Ed about that. My accountant.
There you go. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the most important thing I think people should to walk away from this conversation with is don't be afraid to ask for help. In fact, the smartest thing you can do most of the time, almost always, is ask for help. Don't go at it alone, which is why you're there, Nicole. So anybody who's listening to this conversation who wants to get in touch with you, how do they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. I would say the easiest way is to go to our website, myprivatevista.com. Again, put your information in the contact us field and ask to be connected with me. You can also call our main number at 312-831-4370, and Lorena will be able to get you in touch with me.
That's fantastic. The other thing you can do if you're listening to this podcast for the first time and are not a subscriber, just hit follow. That way, every time Nicole drops a new episode of her podcast, you'll be notified and you can give it a listen. I would also remind you and ask that if you find this podcast interesting and useful, tell people about it. Let them know what you find interesting. And word of mouth is very, very welcome promotional tool, and we appreciate it. Until next time, I'm Bill Tucker on behalf of Nicole Romito and everybody at My Private Vista. Thank you for taking the time to listen today. And remember, today, you can go out to make today a great day or not. It's a choice, and it is yours to make. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen. Until next time.
Thank you for listening to the Dollars and Cents Creating Your Fulfilled Life with Nicole Romito, sponsored by Private Vista. Visit our website at www.myprivatevista.com or give us a call at 312-831-4370. And don't forget to click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. Private Vista is a group comprised of investment professionals registered with Hightower Advisors, LLC, an SEC-registered investment advisor. Advisory services are offered through Hightower Advisors, LLC. This is not an offer to buy or sell securities. No investment process is free of risk, and there is no guarantee that the investment process or the investment opportunities referenced herein will be profitable. Past performance is neither indicative nor a guarantee of future results. The investment opportunities referenced herein may not be suitable for all investors. All data or other information referenced herein is from sources believed to be reliable. Any opinions, news, research, analyses, prices, or other data or information contained in this presentation is provided as general market commentary and does not constitute investment advice. Private Vista and Hightower Advisors, LLC, or any of its affiliates make no representations or warranties expressed or implied as to the accuracy or completeness of the information or for statements or errors or omissions, or results obtained from the use of this information. Private Vista and Hightower Advisors, LLC assume no liability for action made or taken in reliance on or relating in any way to this information. The information is provided as of the date referenced. Such data and other information are subject to changes without notice. This was created for informational purposes only. The opinions expressed herein are solely those of the authors and do not represent those of Hightower Advisors, LLC, or any of its affiliates.